She was still alive when the rope burned through her wrists. Not alive in the way people usually mean it, not screaming, not fighting, just breathing in short broken pulls while the summer grass cut into her back and the Virginia sky turned red above the mountains. But we are getting ahead of ourselves. 5 days later, Caleb Stone stood in the snow outside the sheriff's office in Millbrook, blood running down his left arm from a bullet graze, a Winchester rifle still smoking in his right hand. Behind him, Hannah Mercer pressed herself against the doorframe, trembling but not running. She was holding the pistol he had given her 2 days ago. Her hands were steady now. They had not been steady then. Around them, chaos. Crane's men scattered across the street, some fleeing, some surrendering. And from the edge of town, the thunder of hoofbeats as Federal cavalry poured into Millbrook like a blue tide. Hannah stepped forward to stand beside him. Her white dress was stained with gunpowder and mud. Her feet were wrapped in cloth. Her eyes were the color of spring leaves, and they held the kind of hope that comes only when you have already survived the worst and realize the worst is finally over. "They came," she said. "The marshal. He actually came. You sent for him. He answered." The hoofbeats grew louder. Blue uniforms appeared between the buildings. This is how it ended, not with defeat, not with death, but with justice riding in on horseback and 2 people who had refused to stop fighting. But to understand how we got here, we need to go back. 5 days earlier. The morning mist hung low over the Blue Ridge Mountains, curling through the hollows and valleys like smoke from a fire that had burned itself out long ago. Caleb Stone moved through this mist like he was part of it. His footsteps silent on the forest floor, his breath barely visible in the cool mountain air. He was checking his trap line, the same routine he had followed for 12 years. Wake before dawn, coffee black and bitter. Walk the ridge, check the traps, skin what needed skinning. Sell the furs twice a year to the trading post 20 miles down the mountain. Speak to no one. Trust no one. Need no one. It was a good life if you did not mind the loneliness. And Caleb Stone had learned to prefer the loneliness to the alternative. People asked questions. People expected things. People reminded you of who you used to be and who you could never be again. The mountains asked nothing. The mountains expected nothing. The mountains did not care that he woke screaming 3 nights out of 7, reaching for a rifle that was not there, fighting enemies that had been dead for 20 years. He was 49 years old. His hair had gone gray at the temples, and his beard was more silver than black now. His hands were calloused from work and scarred from war, and there was a long mark running down the left side of his face where a Confederate bayonet had come within an inch of ending his story at Antietam. He stood 6 feet 2 inches tall, with shoulders broad enough to fill a door frame, and eyes that had seen too much to ever be completely at peace. He wore a coat made from the hide of a bear he had killed his second winter on the mountain. His boots were tall and worn soft from years of use. A hunting knife hung at his hip, and a Winchester rifle rested across his shoulder. He looked like exactly what he was, a man who had removed himself from the world and had no intention of returning to it. The trap was empty. Caleb knelt beside it, examining the mechanism, looking for signs of what had triggered it without getting caught. That was when he heard the sound. It was not the sound of an animal. Animals moved through the forest with purpose or with panic, but they moved. This sound was different. This was the sound of something dragging, something scraping, something trying to move forward when movement had become almost impossible. Caleb drew his knife and pressed himself against the trunk of an old oak, making himself part of the shadow. He had survived 4 years of war by learning when to fight and when to wait. This felt like a moment for waiting. The sound grew closer, scraping, gasping, the rustle of fabric against dirt and stone. Then he saw her. A girl, young, maybe 19 or 20, though it was hard to tell with her face streaked with dirt and dried blood. She was crawling up the mountain path on her hands and knees, and she was wearing what had once been a white dress. A wedding dress, Caleb realized with a jolt of recognition. The kind of dress a bride would wear to church on the happiest day of her life. But this dress was torn nearly to rags. The hem was brown with mud and red with blood. The bodice was ripped, exposing scratches and bruises on skin that had never known hard work or harsh treatment until very recently. Her feet were bare. The soles were raw and bleeding, leaving small red prints on the rocks behind her. Her wrists were bound with rope that had cut so deep into her skin that Caleb could see the white of bone in places. And her neck bore the purple fingerprints of someone who had tried to squeeze the life out of her and had very nearly succeeded. She looked up and her eyes met his. Green eyes, the color of the forest in spring when everything is new and alive and full of possibility. But there was no hope in those eyes. There was no plea for mercy. There was only the flat, empty acceptance of someone who had already made peace with death. "Please." Her voice was barely a whisper, scraped raw by screaming or choking or both. "Do not take me back. They will. She did not finish the sentence. She did not need to. Caleb Stone had spent 12 years avoiding other people's problems. 12 years telling himself that what happened in the valley was none of his concern. 12 years building walls between himself and the world that had already taken too much from him. But he had also spent 4 years fighting a war to free people who had been bound in chains. He had watched men die for the principle that no human being should be another person's property. He had carried those memories with him every day since, even when the memories turned to nightmares and the nightmares turned to something worse. He could not look at this girl with rope cutting into her wrists and bruises on her throat and walk away. He was not that man. He had never been that man, no matter how hard he had tried to become him. From somewhere down the mountain came the sound of hoofbeats. At least 3 horses, maybe more, moving fast on the trail below. 3 seconds. That was how long Caleb Stone took to make a decision that would change everything. He stepped out of the shadows, scooped the girl up in his arms like she weighed nothing at all, and ran. He knew these mountains better than any men alive. He had walked every ridge, mapped every hollow, memorized every shortcut and hiding place in 12 years of solitude. The men following would have to stay on the trails. Caleb Stone did not need trails. He moved through the forest like a ghost, like a memory, like something that had never quite been fully real. The girl in his arms was light, too light, the kind of lightness that came from days without food or water. She had gone limp the moment he picked her up, either unconscious or simply too exhausted to care where he was taking her. The hoofbeats faded behind them. The mist swallowed the sound of pursuit until there was nothing left but the whisper of wind through the pines and the steady rhythm of Caleb's breathing. He did not stop until he reached the cabin. It was not much to look at. One room built of logs he had cut himself with a stone fireplace, a bed made of rope and pine boughs, a table where he ate his meals alone, and shelves lined with books that had been his only companions for more than a decade. There was a rocking chair by the window that he had built for Martha back when he thought they would grow old together on this mountain. He had not sat in that chair since the night she died. Caleb laid the girl on his bed, which was the only soft surface in the cabin. Then he stepped back to the far corner of the room, putting as much distance between them as the small space would allow. "The knife is on the table," he said. 6 inches to your right. The door is behind you. I have not locked it." The girl's eyes fluttered open. For a moment she looked confused, like someone waking from a nightmare only to find themselves in another nightmare. Then she saw Caleb, and something in her face changed. Not relaxation, not trust, but something close to calculation. She was measuring him, he realized. Measuring the threat. Good. She was smart enough to be afraid. Smart might keep her alive. "Who are you?" Her voice was still raw, but there was strength underneath it now. The strength of someone who refused to die, no matter how many times death came calling. "Caleb Stone, this is my mountain. You are in my cabin, and no one will find you here unless I want them to." "How do you know they are looking?" "I heard the horses, and I have seen rope burns before. Someone tied you up. Someone is looking to tie you up again." She reached up with trembling fingers and touched the marks on her neck. The fingerprints there told their own story. Someone had not just tied her up. Someone had tried to kill her. "He will not stop," she whispered. "He will never stop." "Who She closed her eyes. For a long moment Caleb thought she had passed out again. Then she spoke, and her voice was hollow, like a bell that had cracked. "Reverend Crane, he says I am his bride. He says my father promised me to him before he died." Her eyes opened, and there was something fierce in them now, something that refused to be extinguished. "But my father never made that promise. My father would never have sold me to a monster." Caleb let the silence stretch between them. He had learned long ago that silence could reveal more than questions. People filled silence with truth when they had no energy left for lies. "Your father," he said finally. "What happened to him?" "He died 3 weeks ago. They said it was an accident. They said he fell from his horse." She laughed, and it was the most terrible sound Caleb had heard since the war. "My father rode horses for 40 years. He did not fall." "You think this Crane killed him?" "I know he did, and I know why." She struggled to sit up, wincing, as the movement pulled at wounds Caleb had not yet seen. "My father was the minister in Millbrook for 20 years. He knew every secret in that town, every sin, every crime. And Crane is not just a minister. He is a moneylender, a thief. He takes land from people who cannot pay their debts. He takes daughters from men who owe him money." She looked at Caleb with eyes that had seen too much for someone so young. "My father had proof, documents. He was going to send them to the federal marshal. And then he died. And Crane came for me." Outside, the morning mist was beginning to burn away. Sunlight slanted through the cabin's single window, illuminating dust motes that floated like tiny stars in the golden air. Somewhere in the distance a bird sang, and the song was so beautiful it felt like a lie. "How did you escape?" Caleb asked. "The night before the wedding. They had me locked in a room above the church. Crane came too, to see me." Her hands clenched into fists. "I hit him with a candlestick, climbed out the window, ran. In a wedding dress, barefoot, with your hands tied. He caught me once, on the road. That is when—" She touched her throat again. "I thought I was dead. But someone came. A wagon. He ran. And I kept running. For how long? 2 days, maybe 3. I do not remember any more." Caleb crossed to the fireplace and began building a fire. He needed something to do with his hands, something to keep him from thinking about all the ways this situation could go wrong. "You need food," he said. "Water, rest. Those wounds on your wrists need cleaning before they fester." "And then what?" "Then we figure out what to do next." She was quiet for a moment. Then she said something that stopped Caleb with his hand halfway to the kindling. "Why are you helping me?" He did not answer right away. The truth was too complicated, too tangled up with memories he did not want to examine. So he gave her a different truth instead. "Because I know what it is like to be hunted, and I know what it is like when there is no one willing to help." The fire caught. Flames licked at the dry wood, and warmth began to spread through the cabin. Caleb filled a pot with water from the barrel in the corner and set it over the flames to heat. "They will come looking," the girl said. "Crane has men, money, friends in high places. He will not stop until he finds me." "Let them come." Caleb turned to face her, and there was something in his eyes that made her breath catch, something old and cold and terribly patient. "They will have to go through me first." Night fell over the Blue Ridge Mountains like a curtain closing on a play that had gone on too long. Caleb sat on the porch rifle across his knees, watching the darkness for movement. Inside the cabin, the girl slept on his bed, her breathing finally steady after he had cleaned and bandaged her wounds. Her name was Hannah Mercer. She had told him that while he worked on the rope burns around her wrists, wincing every time the cloth touched raw flesh, but never crying out. Tough, he had thought, tougher than she looks. He had also learned that her father had been the Reverend James Mercer, a man who had devoted his life to serving the people of Millbrook, a man who had apparently gotten too close to a truth that powerful people wanted to stay buried. And he had learned about Reverend Elijah Crane. Crane was not just a minister. He was a man who had built an empire on the backs of desperate people. He loaned money at rates that could never be repaid, then took everything when the payments stopped coming. Land, livestock, homes, and sometimes, according to whispers that people were too afraid to say out loud, daughters. Hannah was supposed to be his latest acquisition. A trophy to be displayed in his church every Sunday, proof that even the daughter of his greatest enemy had been brought to heel. But Hannah had refused to be acquired, and now she was here in a cabin on a mountain that most people in the valley did not even know existed, under the protection of a men who had not protected anyone in 12 years. The stars came out one by one, scattered across the sky like salt spilled on a black tablecloth. Caleb watched them and thought about Martha. She had loved the stars, used to sit on this same porch in the rocking chair that still sat empty beside him and name the constellations. The hunter, the great bear, the 7 sisters. She had known them all, learned them from her grandmother, and she had wanted to teach them to the children they would someday have. They had never had children. They had never had the chance. Caleb closed his eyes, but the memories would not stop coming. Martha's face on their wedding day, so full of hope. Martha's face the night he came back from the war, still hopeful, but now tinged with something else. Fear, maybe, or the beginning of understanding that the men who had come home was not the same men who had left. And Martha's face at the bottom of the stairs, her neck bent at an angle that no living neck could achieve, her eyes open and staring at nothing. An accident, the doctor had said. A terrible accident. But Caleb knew the truth. He had been drunk. He had been lost in one of the nightmares that came whether he was asleep or awake. He had thought there was an enemy in the house. He had reached for his wife, and he had pushed, and she had fallen. He had killed her as surely as if he had put a bullet in her heart. The next morning he had packed what little he needed and walked up into the mountains. He had not come back down since. A sound from inside the cabin pulled him back to the present. Caleb was on his feet with the rifle raised before he consciously processed what he had heard. Then he recognized it for what it was. Crying. Quiet, muffled, the kind of crying that someone does when they are trying not to be heard. He lowered the rifle. For a long moment he stood there, uncertain what to do. Comforting people had never been his strength, even before the war. And after Martha, after everything he had lost, whatever small ability he might once have had. But he could not just leave her in there crying alone. He had taken responsibility for her the moment he picked her up on that mountain trail. That responsibility did not end at bandaging wounds and providing shelter. He stepped inside. Hannah was sitting up in bed, her knees pulled to her chest, her face hidden against her arms. Her shoulders shook with sobs she was trying desperately to suppress. Caleb cleared his throat, and she looked up quickly, wiping at her eyes with the back of her hand. "I am sorry," she said. "I did not mean to disturb you." "You did not." He hesitated, then pulled the chair away from the table and sat down, close enough to talk, far enough that she would not feel threatened. "Bad dreams." She laughed, but there was no humor in it. "All my dreams are bad now. I do not remember what good dreams feel like." Caleb nodded. He understood that better than she could possibly know. "I used to dream about my father," she continued, her voice barely above a whisper, "about the house where I grew up, about playing in the churchyard when I was little, before I understood anything about the world." She looked at him, and the pain in her eyes was a physical thing. "Now I dream about Crane, about his hands, about the sound of his voice telling me I belong to him." "You do not belong to anyone. Try telling him that." She shook her head. "He believes it. He believes he has the right to take anything he wants because he is a man of God, because he has money and power and friends who will look the other way." Her hands clenched into fists. "And the worst part is everyone else believes it too. The whole town knows what he is. They know what he does. And they do nothing because they are afraid." "What about the law?" "The sheriff," Hannah's laugh was bitter. "Sheriff Hollister does whatever Crane tells him to do, and even if he wanted to help, there is someone else, someone behind Crane, someone even Crane is afraid of." Caleb leaned forward. "Who?" "Judge Solomon Blackwood. He lives in a big house outside of town. People say he has been taking bribes for 30 years. People say there is nothing that happens in 3 counties that he does not know about, does not profit from. She looked at Caleb with eyes that had seen the machine that had crushed her father and was now coming for her. Crane is just the face. Blackwood is the power. And my father had proof of both of them. Proof that could bring everything down. The documents you mentioned. Hannah nodded. My father hid them somewhere in the church. He told me where before he died in case anything happened to him. He made me promise to find them to get them to someone who could use them. And Crane knows you know where they are. That is why he needs me alive, at least until the wedding. Once I am his wife, everything my father owned becomes his, including whatever is hidden in the church. Caleb stood and walked to the window, looking out at the darkness that pressed against the glass. His mind was working through the problem like it used to work through military strategy, terrain, enemy strength, resources, objectives. How long until they figure out where you are? I do not know. The mountain trails are confusing, but Crane has money. He will hire trackers, bounty hunters. However long it takes, he will find me. Then we need to move first. Hannah looked at him with something that might have been hope. Move where? I do not know yet. Caleb turned back to face her. But sitting here waiting for them to come is not a strategy. It is surrender. And I did not survive 4 years of war to surrender to some corrupt preacher and his pet judge. For the first time since he had found her on the mountain, something like a smile crossed Hannah's face. It was small and fragile, and it disappeared almost as quickly as it had appeared, but Caleb saw it. "Thank you," she said, "for everything. I know you did not ask for this. I know I am putting you in danger just by being here. You did not put me anywhere. I made a choice. I will live with the consequences." Why? The question she had asked before, still unanswered. You do not know me. You do not owe me anything. Why risk your life for a stranger? Caleb was quiet for a long moment. The fire crackled in the hearth. The wind whispered through the pines outside. Somewhere in the distance an owl called, and another owl answered. Because I spent 12 years trying to be the kind of men who could walk away from someone in trouble, and I never managed to become him. He met her eyes, and there was something in his gaze that made her heart twist. Some things you cannot run from. Some debts you cannot pay off by hiding. I have been trying to outrun my past for longer than you have been alive. It has not worked. Maybe it is time to stop running and start fighting. Hannah looked at him for a long moment. Then she nodded slowly, like someone making a decision that would change everything. Then we fight together, she said, because I am done running too. The next day dawned clear and cold, the kind of autumn morning that reminded Caleb why he had chosen this mountain in the first place. The air was clean and sharp, scented with pine and wood smoke. The sun rose red over the eastern ridges, painting the world in shades of gold and amber. He was sitting on the porch when Hannah emerged from the cabin wrapped in a blanket he had given her. She looked better than she had the day before. The color had returned to her cheeks, and her eyes were clearer, more focused. She was still injured, still exhausted, but she was no longer teetering on the edge of collapse. Coffee, Caleb offered, holding up the pot he had brewed over the morning fire. She took the cup he poured and wrapped both hands around it, letting the warmth seep into her fingers. How long have you lived up here? 12 years. Alone? Mostly. He nodded toward the ridge to the north. There is an old man named Henry Tate who has a cabin about 5 miles that way. We trade sometimes, talk even less. Otherwise it is just me and the mountain. Hannah sipped her coffee, studying him over the rim of the cup. What did you do before you came up here? I was a soldier, Union Army, infantry. The war. Caleb looked out at the mountains, but his eyes were seeing something else. Smoke rising from burning fields, the smell of gunpowder and blood, the screaming that never stopped, not even in the silence after the cannons fell quiet. I survived Antietam, Gettysburg, a dozen battles whose names nobody remembers anymore. When it was over, I came home. To this mountain. No, I had a farm then, down in the valley. A wife. He paused and Hannah saw something flicker across his face, pain old and deep. That did not last. What happened? For a long moment Caleb did not answer. Then he stood and walked to the edge of the porch, his back to her. "The war changes you," he said. "Changes you in ways you do not understand until it is too late. I came home, but part of me never left those battlefields. I would wake up screaming, thinking I was still there. I would see enemies in shadows, hear cannons and thunder." He took a deep breath. "I was not safe to be around. Martha knew it. She stayed anyway." "Martha, your wife. She died 12 years ago, and I came up here because I could not trust myself to be around people anymore." Hannah set down her coffee cup and stood. She crossed to stand beside him, close but not touching. "The nightmares," she said softly. "You still have them." It was not a question. She had heard him last night pacing the porch when he should have been sleeping. She had seen the shadows under his eyes, the way his hands sometimes trembled when he thought no one was watching. "Every night," he admitted. "Every single night for 20 years. And you think that makes you dangerous?" "I know it does." Hannah was quiet for a moment. Then she said something that made Caleb turn to look at her. "My father was in the war too. He was a chaplain. He saw everything you saw, and he never stopped seeing it. He used to say that the men who came back whole were the ones who had never really been there. The ones who were broken, those were the ones who had actually looked evil in the face. Your father sounds like a wise man." "He was." Her voice caught, and she took a moment to steady herself. "He used to tell me that being broken was not the same as being lost, that the cracks were where the light got in." She looked up at Caleb with those green eyes that seemed to see right through him. "You are not dangerous, Mr. Stone. You are wounded. There is a difference." Caleb opened his mouth to argue, to tell her all the reasons she was wrong, all the evidence that proved he was exactly as dangerous as he feared. But before he could speak, a sound cut through the morning air. Hoofbeats, coming up the mountain, coming fast. In one fluid motion, Caleb grabbed his rifle and pushed Hannah back toward the cabin door. "Inside, stay down. Do not come out until I tell you." "But what if—" "I will be fine. Go." She went, but not before grabbing the pistol he had left on the table the night before. Caleb felt a grim satisfaction at that. She was learning. He positioned himself behind the woodpile, using it as cover while keeping a clear line of sight to the trail. The hoofbeats grew louder, closer. One horse, he realized. Just one. A figure emerged from the tree line. Not one of Crane's men. Not a bounty hunter. It was Henry Tate. The old man was 70 years old, with a white beard that fell to his chest and eyes that had seen 3 wars and the spaces between them. He had been trapping these mountains since before Caleb was born, and he knew them better than anyone alive. He was also riding his horse like the devil himself was on his heels. "Caleb," Henry shouted, pulling his horse to a stop in the yard. "We got trouble, big trouble." Caleb lowered his rifle, but did not put it away. "What kind of trouble?" "The kind that comes with badges and bounty money." Henry swung down from his horse, his movements stiff with age but still quick. "There is a posse forming down in Millbrook, 10, maybe 15 men, and they got a tracker with them, Silas Tate. Relation of yours." "Distant cousin, black sheep of the family. He knows these mountains almost as well as I do." Henry spat on the ground. "He will find your trail. Might take him a day or two, but he will find it." The cabin door opened and Hannah stepped out, the pistol still in her hand. Henry's eyebrows rose when he saw her. "So the rumors are true. You got the Mercer girl up here. How do you know about that?" "Everybody knows. Crane has been telling anyone who will listen that she is crazy. Says she killed her own father and ran off into the mountains. Says there is a $500 reward for anyone who brings her back alive." "That is a lie." Hannah's voice was sharp with outrage. "I did not kill my father. Crane killed him." Henry held up his hands in a placating gesture. "I believe you, girl. Everybody with half a brain believes you. But Crane has got Judge Blackwood backing him up, and Blackwood's word is law in these parts." He looked at Caleb. "You stepped in something deep, old friend." "I know." You got a plan?" Caleb was quiet for a moment, his mind racing through possibilities. Then he shook his head. "Not yet, but I am working on it." "Well, work faster, because that posse will be here inside of 2 days, and they are not coming to talk." The three of them sat around the table inside the cabin, a map of the mountains spread out between them. Henry had brought news, and none of it was good. "Crane is not just sending men," the old men said. "He is coming himself, riding at the head of the posse like some kind of avenging angel." "Why would he risk that?" Hannah asked. "He has money, he has men. Why put himself in danger?" "Because this is personal now." Henry looked at her with something like pity in his eyes. "You hit him with a candlestick. You ran. You made him look like a fool in front of the whole town. Men like Crane cannot let that stand. He has to be the one to bring you back or he loses face." "Good," Caleb said. "If he is with the posse, he is not back in town burning evidence." "About that?" Henry leaned forward, his voice dropping. "There is more. I heard from a friend who has a friend who works at the Blackwood estate. The judge is getting nervous. He is talking about cleaning house." "Cleaning house? How?" "Burning the church. Tonight maybe, or tomorrow. Getting rid of anything that could connect him to Crane's dirty business." Hannah's face went pale. "The documents. My father's proof. It is all in the church. If they burn it—" "Then Crane wins," Caleb finished. "Even if we get you to safety, even if we expose him without that proof, it is just your word against his. And his word has a judge behind it." Silence fell over the table. Outside, the wind picked up, rattling the windows of the cabin. A storm was coming, the kind of late autumn storm that could dump 2 feet of snow on the mountains in a single night. "We have to get those documents," Hannah said. Her voice was steady now, determined. "Before they destroy them." "Are you crazy?" Henry stared at her. "The church is in the middle of town. Crane has men watching it day and night, and even if you got in, how would you get out? The whole place is probably surrounded." "There is a way." Hannah met his gaze without flinching. "My father built a tunnel under the church 20 years ago. A way to escape if the building ever caught fire or if something like this ever happened." She looked at Caleb. "Only my father and I know about it. If we can get to the entrance, I can get us inside." "And where is this entrance?" "In the cemetery, behind the church. There is a crypt that belongs to the founding family of the town. The tunnel runs from there to the basement of the church." Caleb studied her for a long moment. Then he turned to Henry. "How far ahead of the posse can we get if we leave now?" Henry thought about it. "If you go down through Miller's Pass, you could be in Millbrook by nightfall. But that is cutting it close. The posse might be on the main trail by then." "We do not need much time. Get in, get the documents, get out." "And then what? Even with proof, who are you going to show it to? Every lawman in 50 miles is in Blackwood's pocket." Caleb smiled, and it was not a pleasant smile. "Her father was going to send the documents to the federal marshal. We do the same thing. There is a telegraph office in Pine Creek 20 miles north of Millbrook. We get there, send a message, and wait for the cavalry to arrive." "That is a lot of if," Henry said. "A lot of places where things could go wrong. You have a better idea." The old man was quiet. Then he sighed and shook his head. "No, I do not. But I am too old to be riding into town and picking fights with crooked preachers. My part in this is done." He stood, his joints creaking. "I will head back to my cabin. If anyone comes asking, I have not seen you. I have not seen the girl. I do not know anything about anything. Thank you, Henry, for the warning. Do not thank me. Just try not to get killed. I would hate to have to bury you." He left, riding back into the forest the way he had come. Caleb watched him go, then turned to Hannah. "Are you sure about this? Once we leave this mountain, there is no coming back." Hannah looked around the cabin, at the rough-hewn walls, at the simple furniture, at the rocking chair by the window that no one ever sat in. "This is not my home," she said. "I have no home anymore. Crane took that from me when he took my father. All I have left is the truth, and I am not going to let him take that too." Caleb nodded. "Then we leave at noon. Pack light." Bring only what you can carry at a run." He turned toward the fireplace where his ammunition was stored. He would need every bullet he had. "Mr. Stone." He looked back. "Whatever happens," Hannah said, "thank you for everything. Even if we fail, even if we die trying, at least I did not give up. At least I fought." "We are not going to fail," Caleb said, "and we are not going to die. I made a promise to protect you, and I intend to keep it." "Why, you still have not really told me why you are doing this." Caleb was quiet for a long moment. Then he walked to the shelf above the fireplace where a photograph sat with its face turned to the wall. He picked it up, looked at it, and for just a moment his face softened with a grief that had not faded in 12 years. "Because someone I loved died because I could not protect her. Because I spent 12 years hiding from that failure, pretending that if I stayed away from people, I could never fail anyone again." He set the photograph back down face up this time so that the woman in it could see the cabin she had never had the chance to grow old in. But hiding is not living, and failing to try is worse than trying and failing. He met Hannah's eyes. "I am going to get you to safety, Hannah Mercer. I am going to help you expose Crane and Blackwood and everyone else who had a hand in your father's death. And then maybe for the first time in 12 years, I will be able to look in the mirror without being ashamed of what I see." The storm broke 2 hours after noon, just as Caleb had predicted. Snow came down in sheets, turning the world white and reducing visibility to a few dozen yards. It was miserable weather for traveling. It was perfect weather for escaping. They made their way down the mountain through paths that only Caleb knew, paths that were invisible under the snow to anyone who had not walked them 100 times before. Hannah struggled to keep up her bare feet wrapped in strips of cloth cut from one of Caleb's spare shirts, but she did not complain. Not once. By nightfall, they had reached the edge of the forest above Millbrook. The town lay below them, its buildings dark shapes against the white carpet of new snow. Lights flickered in windows. Smoke rose from chimneys. It looked peaceful, almost idyllic. It was anything but. "There," Hannah pointed to a white building near the center of town. "That is the church, and there behind it you can see the cemetery." Caleb studied the terrain through the falling snow. The church was surrounded by open ground. Getting to it would mean crossing at least 100 yards with no cover. If anyone was watching. How many guards? I do not know. There were always 2 at least watching my window, but now— She shook her head. "Crane is paranoid. He could have a dozen men out there. We wait for midnight. The snow will cover our tracks, and anyone standing guard will be half frozen and wishing they were somewhere else." They found shelter in an abandoned barn at the edge of the forest and settled in to wait. The cold was bitter, seeping through their clothes and into their bones, but neither of them suggested a fire. A fire would mean smoke, and smoke would mean discovery. Hannah huddled against the wall, pulling her blanket tighter around her shoulders. In the dim light, she looked very young and very afraid. "Tell me about your father," Caleb said, partly to distract her, partly because he genuinely wanted to know. "What kind of man was he?" A sad smile crossed Hannah's face. "He was good. Truly good in a way that most people only pretend to be. He believed that everyone deserved mercy, that everyone could be redeemed." She paused. "Even Crane. Even when he knew what Crane really was, he believed that the men could change. That is why it took him so long to gather the evidence. He kept hoping Crane would repent on his own. But he didn't. No, he just got worse. And by the time my father realized that some people choose evil, that some people cannot be saved, it was too late. He was a brave man, standing up to someone like Crane knowing what it might cost him. He said it was not bravery. He said it was duty. That God had put him in a position to see the truth, and that meant he had a responsibility to act on it." Hannah's voice caught. "He knew he might die. He told me where the documents were hidden because he knew Crane might kill him before he could send them himself. He made me promise to finish what he started. And you are keeping that promise." "Trying to." She looked at Caleb. "What about you? What did your wife think about you going off to war?" The question hit Caleb like a physical blow. For a moment he could not breathe. Then he forced himself to answer. She was afraid. She did not want me to go, but she understood why I had to. She said— He stopped, swallowed. She said that some things were worth fighting for, even if the fighting might cost you everything. She sounds like she was a wise woman, too. She was. Caleb closed his eyes. She was the best person I ever knew. And I— He could not finish the sentence, could not say the words that had been choking him for 12 years. Hannah reached out and touched his arm. The gesture was simple unda, mending just a reminder that she was there. You did not kill her, she said softly. Whatever happened, whatever you think you did not kill her. You do not know that. I know you. I have watched you for 2 days. The way you move, the way you speak, the way you put yourself between me and every possible threat without even thinking about it. You are a protector, Mr. Stone. It is who you are. It is what you were made for. I was made for war, for killing. You were made to keep people safe. The war just used that gift for its own purposes. She squeezed his arm. Whatever happened with Martha, it was not because you wanted to hurt her. It was because the war broke something inside you, and you have been punishing yourself for that ever since. Caleb opened his eyes and looked at her. In the darkness of the barn, with snow falling outside and death waiting somewhere in the town below, this girl, who had every reason to be thinking only of her own survival, was trying to comfort him. Why do you care? He asked. You have your own troubles, more than enough of them. Because you are the first person in 3 weeks who has treated me like a human being instead of a problem to be solved. Because you saved my life without asking for anything in return. Because— She hesitated. Because when I look at you, I see someone who has been through hell and come out the other side. And that gives me hope that maybe I can do the same. They sat in silence for a long moment. The snow continued to fall, burying the world in white. Then Caleb said something he had not said to anyone in 12 years. Thank you. Midnight came, and with it a stillness that felt almost holy. The snow had stopped falling, but the clouds remained blocking out the moon and stars. The world was dark and cold and silent. They moved through the empty streets like ghosts, keeping to the shadows, avoiding the circles of light cast by oil lamps in windows. Caleb went first, his rifle ready, his eyes scanning constantly for threats. Hannah followed close behind, matching his footsteps, exactly making no sound on the snow-covered ground. The cemetery gate was locked, but the lock was old and rusted, and Caleb had it open in seconds. They slipped inside, moving between headstones that rose from the snow like crooked teeth. There, Hannah pointed to a large stone structure near the back of the cemetery. The Blackwood family crypt. The entrance is inside. They were halfway to the crypt when Caleb heard it, a footstep, the crunch of snow under a boot. He grabbed Hannah and pulled her down behind a large headstone just as a figure emerged from the shadows near the church. One of Crane's guards. The man was bundled against the cold, his breath making clouds in the frigid air, his rifle held loosely in his hands. He was walking a patrol route, moving slowly along the edge of the cemetery. Caleb held his breath. Beside him, Hannah was utterly still. The guard passed within 10 feet of their hiding place. For a terrible moment, he seemed to pause, seemed to sense that something was wrong. Then he moved on, continuing his patrol toward the front of the church. They waited until he was out of sight. Then they moved. The crypt door was heavy, but it opened silently on hinges that someone had kept oiled. Inside, the darkness was absolute. Caleb struck a match, and the small flame revealed a stone chamber lined with coffins. At the back, behind the oldest coffin, was a section of wall that looked subtly different from the rest. Hannah went to it without hesitation. She pressed on specific stones in a specific sequence, and a section of the wall swung inward, revealing a narrow tunnel. "Follow me," she whispered. "And stay close. The tunnel has some dangerous spots." They descended into the darkness, leaving the world of the living behind. The tunnel was older than the town itself. Hannah had told him that on the way down, her voice echoing strangely off walls that had been carved by hands dead for a century. The original settlers had built it as an escape route from Indian attacks back when the Blue Ridge Mountains were still wild and dangerous and full of things that wanted to kill you. Some things Caleb reflected never really changed. The passage was narrow enough that his shoulders brushed both walls and low enough that he had to duck his head. Water dripped from somewhere above, making the stones slick and treacherous. The match had burned down to nothing, and now they moved in complete darkness. Hannah's hand on his shoulder, the only connection between them. "How much farther?" he asked, keeping his voice low. "Not far. There should be stairs ahead. They lead up to the basement of the church." They found the stairs a few minutes later. Stone steps, worn smooth by decades of use that had ended long before either of them was born. Caleb went first, testing each step before putting his full weight on it, listening for any sound from above. At the top of the stairs was a wooden door, old heavy bound with iron straps that had rusted to the color of dried blood. Caleb pressed his ear against it and heard nothing. "The basement is used for storage," Hannah whispered. "Old furniture, broken pews, things the church does not need anymore. My father kept the documents hidden in a metal box beneath a loose floorboard in the far corner." "And you are sure no one else knows about this?" "Only my father and me. He made me memorize the location when I was 12 years old. He said someday I might need to find it." Caleb nodded in the darkness. Then he pushed open the door. The basement was exactly as Hannah had described. Dusty, cluttered, filled with the detritus of decades of church life. Moonlight filtered through a single small window near the ceiling, providing just enough light to navigate by. They moved quickly to the corner Hannah had indicated. Caleb knelt and began testing floorboards while Hannah kept watch at the stairs leading up to the main church. The third board he tried moved under his fingers. He pried it up and reached into the space beneath. His hand closed on cold metal, and he pulled out a box about the size of a Bible. It was locked, but the lock was simple, and he had it open in seconds. Inside were papers, dozens of them. Contracts, ledgers, letters, all covered in neat handwriting that must have belonged to Reverend Mercer. Caleb could not read them in the dim light, but he did not need to. The fact that they existed was enough. "I have them," he said, closing the box and tucking it inside his coat. "Let us go." But before they could move, a sound came from above. Footsteps, heavy boots on wooden floors, and voices. "Check the basement," someone said. "Crane wants every inch of this building searched before we burn it." Hannah's face went white. Caleb grabbed her arm and pulled her toward the tunnel entrance, but he knew they would never make it in time. The footsteps were already on the stairs, coming down fast. He made a decision in less than a second. "Go," he whispered, pushing her toward the tunnel door. "Get out. Head for Pine Creek. Find the telegraph office and send word to the federal marshal. I am not leaving you. You have to. The documents are more important than either of us. If they catch us both, everything your father died for dies with us. But you will be. I will be fine." He pressed the metal box into her hands. "Go. Now. Do not stop until you reach Pine Creek." For a terrible moment she hesitated. Then she pressed her hand against his chest, right over his heart. "Do not die," she said. "I am not done needing you yet." And then she was gone, slipping through the tunnel door and disappearing into the darkness. Caleb closed the door behind her and turned to face whatever was coming down those stairs. 3 men, armed with rifles. The first one reached the bottom of the stairs and saw Caleb standing there in the darkness, and his eyes went wide. "It is him, the mountain men. He is here." Caleb did not give him a chance to say anything else. He moved like the soldier he had once been, fast and brutal and utterly without mercy. The first man went down with a broken jaw before he could raise his rifle. The second managed to get off a shot that went wide, splintering wood somewhere behind Caleb's head before a fist like a sledgehammer drove the consciousness from his body. The third man was smarter. He backed up the stairs, keeping his rifle pointed at Caleb, shouting for reinforcements. Caleb let him go. He had bought Hannah time. That was all that mattered. He turned and ran for the tunnel, hoping to catch up with her before the whole town came down on their heads. But he had taken only 3 steps when something hit him from behind. something hard and heavy that drove him to his knees and sent stars exploding across his vision. He tried to rise, tried to turn and face his attacker, but another blow caught him across the shoulders and drove him flat. The last thing he saw before darkness took him was a pair of polished boots standing inches from his face. And the last thing he heard was a voice he recognized from Hannah's descriptions. "Well, well, the mountain man himself. I have been looking forward to meeting you, Mr. Stone." Reverend Elijah Crane had arrived. Caleb woke to pain. His head throbbed where he had been struck, and his shoulders ached from whatever they had hit him with. His hands were bound behind his back, the rope cutting into his wrists with a familiar burn. He was in a room he did not recognize. Large, well-furnished, with expensive paintings on the walls, and a fire crackling in an enormous stone fireplace. A study of some kind belonging to someone with money and taste, or at least someone with money. "Ah, you are awake. Good." Caleb turned his head and saw a man sitting in a leather chair near the fire. 50 years old, maybe, 55, with silver hair combed back from a face that might have been handsome once, but had gone soft with age and indulgence. He wore the black coat and white collar of a minister, but there was nothing holy about the look in his eyes. Reverend Elijah Crane looked at Caleb the way a cat looks at a mouse. It is about to eat. "You have caused me a great deal of trouble, Mr. Stone. A very great deal of trouble indeed." Caleb said nothing. He was too busy testing his bonds, looking for weakness, calculating the distance between himself and the men who had ordered the death of Hannah's father. "The silent type, I see. That is fine. I do not need you to talk. I just need you to listen." Crane stood and walked to a side table where he poured himself a glass of whiskey from a crystal decanter. "You have something that belongs to me. Or rather, the girl you helped escape has something that belongs to me. I want it back." "I do not know what you are talking about. Please, let us not insult each other's intelligence." Crane took a sip of his whiskey. "The documents, the ones Reverend Mercer hid in the church. The girl took them and you helped her. My men found the tunnel. They found your tracks in the snow. What they did not find was the girl or the documents. Then I guess you have a problem." Crane smiled, and it was the coldest smile Caleb had ever seen. "No, Mr. Stone, you have a problem. You see, I know these mountains. I know every trail, every hiding place, every way in and out. The girl cannot have gotten far. My men are already searching for her, and when they find her, and they will find her, they will bring her back to me, along with my property." "She is not your property. Neither are those documents. Everything in this county is my property." Crane set down his glass and walked toward Caleb, stopping just out of reach. "I have spent 30 years building my position here. 30 years of careful planning, careful investment, careful removal of obstacles. I am not going to let some troublesome minister and his hysterical daughter destroy everything I have built." "You killed him, Mercer. You killed him because he knew what you really are." "I removed an obstacle, that is all. He was old. His heart was weak. It was only a matter of time before something happened to him." Crane shrugged. "I simply accelerated the process." Caleb felt rage building in his chest, cold and hard and patient. This man had murdered a good man and was planning to marry his daughter against her will. This man had built an empire on the suffering of desperate people. This man was everything Caleb had fought against in the war, everything he had hoped to never encounter again. "You will not get away with this," he said. "Someone will stop you." "Who?" "The sheriff. He works for me. The judge. We are old friends. The federal marshal." Crane laughed. "By the time anyone from outside this county hears about any of this, the documents will be ashes, and the girl will be my wife. And you, Mr. Stone, will be dead. Then kill me, and get it over with." "Oh, I intend to, but not yet. First you are going to tell me where the girl is heading. Then you are going to tell me everything she told you about those documents. And then if you are very cooperative, I might make your death quick." Caleb met his eyes without flinching. "Go to hell." Crane's smile widened. "I was hoping you would say that. You see, I have some experience with making reluctant people talk. It is one of my special talents." He turned and walked to the door. "I will give you a few hours to think about your situation. Consider your options carefully, Mr. Stone. Cooperation will make the next few days much more pleasant for you. Resistance will make them very, very unpleasant indeed." The door closed behind him, and Caleb was alone. He did not waste time on fear or despair. He had been in worse situations during the war. He had been captured twice, beaten, starved, left for dead. He had survived all of it through patience, observation, and the willingness to act when the opportunity presented itself. He began testing his bonds more carefully, looking for any way to loosen them. Hours passed. Caleb worked at his bonds until his wrists were raw and bleeding, but the rope held. Whoever had tied him knew what they were doing. The fire burned low. The room grew cold. Outside the windows he could see that night had fallen again. He had been unconscious for most of a day. Hannah was out there somewhere, running through the snow with the documents that could bring Crane down. He had to believe she had made it. Had to believe she was still free, still heading for Pine Creek and the telegraph office. If she had been captured, Crane would have gloated about it. The fact that he was still asking questions meant she was still out of his reach. Hold on, he thought. Just hold on a little longer. The door opened and two men entered, rough-looking men with the eyes of people who enjoyed hurting others. They were followed by Crane, who had changed into a fresh shirt and coat. "I trust you have had time to reconsider your position," Crane said. Caleb said nothing. "Very well. We will do this the hard way." What followed was not something Caleb wanted to remember. Pain applied with scientific precision by men who had clearly done this before. Questions asked over and over again. Where is the girl? Where is she going? What did she tell you about the documents? Caleb gave them nothing. Not because he was brave, though he was, not because he was stubborn, though he was that too, but because every minute they spent on him was a minute they were not spending on finding Hannah. Every question they asked him was a question they were not getting answered. He was buying her time with blood and pain. It was the only thing he had left to give. Sometime in the night, between one wave of agony and the next, the door opened and a new figure entered the room. An old man older than Crane, with white hair and a face like a vulture. He wore expensive clothes and carried himself with the easy confidence of someone who had never been told no in his entire life. Judge Solomon Blackwood had arrived. "This is taking too long," Blackwood said, looking at Caleb with cold, appraising eyes. "We do not have time for games, Elijah. The girl is out there with evidence that could destroy us both." "He is stubborn, but he will break. They always break. I do not care if he breaks. I care about results." Blackwood walked closer to Caleb, studying him like a specimen in a jar. "You were a soldier in the war, were you not, Union Army? I can always tell. There is something in the way you carry yourself even now, a discipline that civilian life never quite erases." Caleb met his gaze without speaking. "I was a soldier too, Confederate, cavalry officer. I learned a great deal about men during the war, about what makes them fight, what makes them surrender, what makes them willing to die for a cause they barely understand." Blackwood smiled. "And I learned that the direct approach is rarely the most effective." He turned to Crane. "You have been trying to make him talk. Wrong approach. He will die before he talks. That much is obvious. So stop trying to get information from him and start using him for what he is actually good for." "And what is that bait?" Blackwood's smile widened. "The girl cares about him. I saw how she looked at him when they were in the church basement. She was ready to stay and fight beside him. She only left because he made her leave. So she will come back. Not today, not tomorrow, but soon. She will finish whatever she is trying to do with those documents, and then she will come back for him, because she is young and foolish and she thinks she owes him something. And when she comes back, we will be waiting." Blackwood looked at Caleb one more time. "Keep him alive. Keep him visible. Let word spread that the mountain man is our prisoner. Eventually she will hear about it, and when she does, she will come running." He walked to the door, then paused. Oh, and Elijah, stop playing with your food. We have less than 48 hours before the wedding. After that, this becomes much more complicated. Crane nodded. I understand. I hope you do. Because if this goes wrong, I am not going down alone. Blackwood left and the door closed behind him. Crane looked at Caleb for a long moment. Then he turned to his men. Clean him up. Get him some food and water. We need him alive and presentable for when the girl returns. He paused at the door. And make sure everyone in town knows we have him. I want rumors spreading. I want word to reach every corner of these mountains. He left, and Caleb was alone again with his pain and his rage and the slowly dawning realization that he had just become a piece in a game much larger than he had understood. But there was something else, too. Something Blackwood had not counted on. Hope. Because if Blackwood was right, if Hannah really was coming back for him, then she had not been caught. She was still free, still running, still fighting. All he had to do was stay alive long enough for her to finish what she had started. He could do that. He had survived worse. 2 days passed. Caleb was moved from the study to a room in the back of Crane's church, a small cell with a barred window and a door that was never unlocked. They fed him twice a day, just enough to keep him alive, and they let him see a doctor who treated his wounds with rough efficiency. He spent the hours working on his bonds, resting when he could and listening. Always listening. The walls were thin and voices carried. He heard Crane's men talking about the search for Hannah, about the patrols they were running on every road and trail out of the valley. He heard them complain about the cold and the snow and the boredom of searching for a girl who had vanished like smoke. But he also heard something else. Doubt. Fear. The men were starting to wonder if maybe the girl had gotten away clean, if maybe they were wasting their time on a target they would never find. And on the second night, he heard something that made his heart leap. Tate is back, one of the guards said. Says he found tracks heading north toward Pine Creek. Fresh tracks maybe 2 days old. So she is heading for the telegraph office. That is what Tate thinks. Crane is sending men to intercept her. Will they make it in time? Tate says maybe, if they ride hard and if the snow holds off. Caleb closed his eyes and said a prayer he had not prayed in years. Not for himself, for Hannah, for the girl who was running through the mountains with everything her father had died for, trying to reach help before Crane's men reached her. Run, he thought. Run and do not stop. Do not look back. Do not come back for me. But even as he thought it, he knew she would not listen. She was too stubborn, too brave, too determined to leave anyone behind, just like Martha had been. The thought brought pain, as it always did. But this time, mixed with the pain, there was something else. Not hope exactly, but something close to it. A feeling that maybe, just maybe, the universe was offering him a chance to do something right for once, to protect someone who needed protecting, to save a life instead of taking one. He would not waste that chance, whatever it cost him. On the morning of the third day, everything changed. Caleb woke to the sound of gunfire. Not close, not inside the town, but somewhere in the mountains above. Scattered shots at first, then a sustained volley that echoed through the valleys like thunder. He was at the window in an instant, pressing his face against the bars, trying to see what was happening. But the window faced the wrong direction, showing only the cemetery behind the church and the dark wall of the forest beyond. More shots. Shouting. The sound of hooves pounding on frozen ground. Then silence. A long, terrible silence that stretched on and on until Caleb thought he would go mad from the waiting. The door of his cell burst open. 2 guards grabbed him, one on each arm, and dragged him out into the main sanctuary of the church. Crane was there, his face pale and furious, his hands shaking as he pointed at Caleb. "Bring him, now!" They dragged him outside into the cold morning air and the weak winter sunlight. A crowd had gathered in front of the church, townspeople who had come running at the sound of gunfire. They parted as Crane's men pulled Caleb through them, their faces a mixture of fear and curiosity and something that might have been hope. At the edge of the crowd, Caleb saw Sheriff Hollister. The lawman's face was unreadable, but there was something in his eyes that had not been there before. Something that looked like doubt. They stopped at the edge of the cemetery where the ground sloped up toward the forest. And there, coming down the hill through the snow, was a sight that made Caleb's heart stop. Hannah. She was walking slowly, her hands raised in surrender. Her face was bruised and her clothes were torn, but she was alive. Behind her walked Silas Tate, the bounty hunter, his rifle pointed at her back. But that was not what made Caleb's blood run cold. What made his blood run cold was what she was carrying, or rather, what she was not carrying. The metal box was gone. The documents were gone. Hannah met his eyes across the distance and she smiled. A small secret smile that only he could see. And in that moment Caleb understood. She had not been captured. She had come back on purpose, and the documents were somewhere else entirely. Tate pushed Hannah forward, and she stumbled, catching herself before she fell. Crane stepped toward her, his face twisted with rage. "Where are they?" he demanded. "Where are the documents?" "I do not know what you are talking about." Crane grabbed her by the throat, his fingers digging into the bruises that were already there. "Do not play games with me, girl. You had them. Tate saw you with them in Pine Creek. Where are they now?" "Gone." Hannah's voice was choked but defiant. "I sent them, before Tate caught me. They are already on their way to the federal marshal in Washington." The color drained from Crane's face. He released her so suddenly that she fell to her knees in the snow. "You are lying." "Am I?" Hannah looked up at him and there was triumph in her eyes. "Then why are you so afraid?" Crane drew back his hand to strike her, but before he could another voice cut through the air. "That is enough." Everyone turned. Sheriff Hollister had stepped forward, his hand resting on the butt of his pistol. "Sheriff, this does not concern you." Crane said, his voice dangerous. "A woman being beaten in the street concerns me. That is my job." Hollister looked at Hannah, then at Caleb, then at the crowd that had grown silent and watchful. "This has gone far enough. I am taking them both into custody. They will face trial for whatever crimes they are accused of. They are mine. I have a warrant. You have a piece of paper from Judge Blackwood. That is not the same thing." Hollister's jaw was set. "The federal marshal has been sent for. Until he arrives, these two are under my protection. Anyone who disagrees can take it up with me." For a long moment, nobody moved. The tension was so thick it felt like a physical presence pressing down on everyone in the square. Then Crane smiled. It was the most frightening smile Caleb had ever seen. "Very well, Sheriff. Have it your way, for now." He turned to his men. "We are leaving, but this is not over, not by a long shot." He walked away, his men falling in behind him. The crowd began to disperse, muttering amongst themselves, casting glances at Hannah and Caleb and the sheriff who had just defied the most powerful men in the county. Hollister waited until Crane was out of sight. Then he turned to Caleb and Hannah. "You two have made some very dangerous enemies. I hope you know what you are doing." "We know," Hannah said. "The question is, do you—" Hollister was quiet for a moment. Then he nodded slowly like a man making a decision that would change everything. "I have looked the other way for too long. I told myself it was politics, that it was not my place to question judges and preachers. But I watched a good men die because I did nothing. I will not make that mistake again." He gestured for his deputies to help Caleb to his feet. "Come on, let us get you somewhere safe before Crane decides to try something stupid." As they walked toward the sheriff's office, Hannah fell into step beside Caleb. She took his hand and squeezed it once. "I told you I would come back for you." "I told you not to. I do not take orders very well." Despite everything, despite the pain and the fear and the knowledge that their troubles were far from over, Caleb found himself smiling. "No," he said, "I suppose you do not." The sheriff's office was a small building near the center of town with a single jail cell in the back and an iron stove that struggled to keep out the cold. It was not much, but it was better than Crane's church. Hollister sent his deputies to stand guard outside, then closed the door and turned to face them. "All right, tell me everything, from the beginning." So they did. Hannah told him about her father's investigation, about the documents he had gathered about Crane's threats and her father's death. Caleb told him about finding Hannah on the mountain, about the escape through the tunnel, about his capture and the days of questioning. And Hannah told him about Pine Creek. "I made it to the telegraph office," she said. "I sent a message to the federal marshal's office in Washington. I told them everything, names, dates, crimes. I told them to send someone immediately. And the documents. I gave them to the telegraph operator. He is a friend of my father's, someone I knew I could trust. He is hiding them until the marshal arrives." Hollister sat back in his chair, processing everything. "So the evidence is safe, and the federal government knows what is happening here?" "Yes." "Then why did you come back? You could have stayed in Pine Creek, waited for the marshal. You would have been safe there." Hannah looked at Caleb. "Because I could not leave him behind, because he risked his life for me, and I was not going to let him die for it." Hollister followed her gaze. Something shifted in his expression, and for the first time Caleb saw the men behind the badge. A men who had compromised too long and regretted it. A men who was tired of being afraid. "Crane will not let this go," the sheriff said. "He and Blackwood have too much to lose. They will come for you, both of you." "Let them come," Caleb said. "I have been running from fights my whole life. I am done running. You are injured, weak. You can barely stand. Then give me a chair and a rifle. I will fight sitting down." Despite the gravity of the situation, Hollister almost smiled. "You are a stubborn Menstone." "I have been told." The sheriff stood and walked to the window, looking out at the street. The sun was setting, painting the snow in shades of red and gold. In a few hours it would be fully dark. "I can hold them off for a while," he said, "but not forever. Crane has more men than I do, and Blackwood has the legal authority to override anything I try to do. We need that federal marshal to get here before they decide to take matters into their own hands." "How long until he arrives?" 2 days, maybe 3, depending on the roads and the weather." "Can we hold out that long?" Hollister turned back to face them. "I do not know, but I am going to try." He reached for his coat. "I need to make some arrangements. Stay here, both of you. Do not open the door for anyone except me or my deputies." He left, and they were alone. Hannah sat down heavily in one of the office chairs, the adrenaline that had been keeping her going finally beginning to fade. She looked exhausted, beaten, pushed to the very edge of her endurance. But she also looked determined, like someone who had made peace with whatever was coming. "You should not have come back," Caleb said, lowering himself into the chair across from her. "It was too dangerous. And you should not have stayed behind to let them capture you. We are even. That is not how it works. That is exactly how it works." She met his eyes, and there was something in her gaze that made his heart twist. "You saved my life, Mr. Stone, more than once. You gave me time to get the documents out, time to send for help. Everything that happens from here on out, we face it together, even if it means dying. Even then." She reached out and took his hand. "I have already lost everyone I love. I am not going to lose you too." The words hung in the air between them, heavy with meaning neither of them was quite ready to acknowledge. Finally, Caleb spoke. "When this is over, when Crane and Blackwood are in prison and the town is safe, what will you do?" "I do not know. I have not thought that far ahead." She paused. "What about you? Will you go back to your mountain?" Caleb considered the question. A week ago the answer would have been obvious. The mountain was his home, his sanctuary, the only place he felt he belonged. But now— "I do not know," he admitted. "I spent 12 years hiding up there, trying to forget what I had done, trying to punish myself for sins I could not forgive. But hiding is not living, and I am tired of punishing myself for being men. Martha's death was not your fault. Maybe not, but it took me a long time to understand that. And even now, some days I still do not believe it." He squeezed her hand. "But you helped. What you said about being broken, not being the same as being lost, about the cracks being where the light gets in. I had not thought about it that way before." My father used to say that. He sounds like a wise man. He was. Tears glistened in her eyes, but she did not let them fall. He would have liked you, I think. He had a soft spot for stubborn old soldiers. I am not that old. You are 49. That is not old. That is experienced. For the first time in days, Hannah laughed. It was a small laugh, weak and tired, but it was real. And hearing it made Caleb feel something he had not felt in 12 years. Hope. The night passed slowly. Hollister returned with food and blankets, and they took turns keeping watch through the dark hours. Outside, the town was quiet, but it was the quiet of held breath of something waiting to happen. Just before dawn it happened. Caleb was at the window when he saw them coming. 20 men, maybe more, riding down the main street with torches in their hands. At their head was Crane, and beside him rode Judge Blackwood. They stopped in front of the sheriff's office, and Crane's voice rang out in the cold morning air. "Sheriff Hollister, we know you have the prisoners. Send them out, and no one needs to get hurt." Hollister was on his feet and an instant rifle in his hands. "They are in my custody, Crane. You have no authority here." "I have the authority of the law. Judge Blackwood has signed warrants for both of them. Murder, theft, arson. The charges are serious, and the evidence is overwhelming. The evidence is fabricated, and everyone knows it. That is for a court to decide, not you." Crane gestured to his men. "You have 5 minutes to send them out. After that, we are coming in." Hollister looked at Caleb and Hannah. His face was set, his jaw tight, but there was fear in his eyes. He knew the odds as well as they did. "There is a back door," he said quietly. "It leads to an alley that runs behind the buildings. If you move fast, you might be able to reach the horses before they surround the place." "What about you?" Hannah asked. "I will hold them as long as I can. Buy you time." "They will kill you." "Probably." Hollister smiled grimly. "But I spent too many years being a coward. It is time I did something worth remembering." Caleb shook his head. "No, we are not running. Not anymore." "Stone, be reasonable. You cannot fight 20 men." "No, but I can fight with you." Caleb picked up one of the rifles leaning against the wall. "And so can she." He looked at Hannah, and she nodded. There was no hesitation in her eyes, no fear, just determination. "We stand together," she said. "Whatever happens." Hollister stared at them for a long moment. Then he laughed, a short, sharp sound that was half despair and half admiration. "You are both crazy." "Probably," Caleb agreed. "But at least we are not running." Outside, Crane's voice rang out again. "Time is up, Sheriff. What is your answer?" Hollister walked to the door and opened it just wide enough to shout through. "My answer is the same as it was before. These people are in my custody, and they will stay in my custody until the federal marshal arrives. If you want them, you will have to come through me." "So be it." The first shot shattered the window behind them. What followed was chaos. Bullets tore through the thin walls of the sheriff's office, splintering wood and shattering glass. Caleb pulled Hannah to the floor and covered her body with his own, while Hollister returned fire from behind the heavy oak desk. "Back door," Hollister shouted. "Now while they are focused on the front." They crawled across the floor, staying below the level of the windows, while the world exploded around them. Caleb reached the back door first and kicked it open, then pulled Hannah through into the alley beyond. Cold air hit them like a wall. Snow was falling again, thick and fast, reducing visibility to a few dozen yards. Perfect cover for escape. But they had taken only a few steps when a figure appeared at the end of the alley, blocking their path. Silas Tate. The bounty hunter smiled, his rifle pointed directly at Caleb's chest. "End of the line, mountain men." Caleb stepped in front of Hannah, putting himself between her and the gun. "Let her go. Take me. I am the one you want. I want both of you. Crane is paying double for the pair." "Then you will have to kill me first." Tate shrugged. "If that is how you want it." His finger tightened on the trigger. And then from somewhere in the swirling snow came a sound that made everyone freeze. Hoofbeats. Dozens of them. Coming fast. A rider emerged from the white curtain, and then another, and then a dozen more. They wore blue uniforms and carried cavalry sabers, and at their head rode a man with a marshal's badge pinned to his chest. "Federal officers," the marshal shouted. "Lower your weapons. Everyone is under arrest." Tate looked at the soldiers, then at Caleb, then back at the soldiers. His shoulders slumped. "Well," he said, "that is not good." He dropped his rifle and raised his hands. Around the front of the building the gunfire had stopped. Caleb could hear confused shouting, the clatter of dropped weapons, the thunder of hooves as the cavalry surrounded Crane's men. It was over. Hannah grabbed Caleb's arm, her fingers digging into his sleeve. "They came," she whispered. "The marshal. He actually came." "You sent for him," he answered. "I did not think. I did not dare hope. Sometimes hope is all we have." Caleb put his arm around her shoulders and held her close. "And sometimes it is enough." The marshal's name was Thomas Wright, and he had ridden through the night with 30 cavalrymen after receiving Hannah's telegraph message. He had brought with him federal warrants for the arrest of Reverend Elijah Crane and Judge Solomon Blackwood based on preliminary evidence that had been forwarded from the telegraph office in Pine Creek. Now as dawn broke over Millbrook, he stood in the town square while his men rounded up Crane's supporters and secured the church and the Blackwood estate. Crane himself was in chains, his face a mask of fury and disbelief. Beside him, Blackwood looked older than his years. Silas Tate stood apart from them, his wrists bound, his expression that of a man calculating whether cooperation might reduce his sentence. Blackwood was a man who had finally been caught by the crimes he thought he had buried long ago. "You have no authority here," Crane was saying. "This is a state matter. Federal jurisdiction does not apply." "Murder conspiracy and corruption of public officials," Wright said calmly. "When a federal judge is involved, it becomes federal business." He looked at Blackwood. "We have been watching you for a long time, Your Honor. We just needed proof. Now we have it." They were led away, and the town watched them go. Some faces showed relief, others showed fear, and a few showed something that looked like shame, the shame of people who had known what was happening and had done nothing to stop it. Hannah stood beside Caleb as the prisoners were loaded into a wagon. Her hand found his and held on tight. "It is really over," she said softly. "After everything, it is really over. The hard part is over. Now comes the harder part." "What do you mean?" "Rebuilding, moving on, learning how to live in a world where you do not have to be afraid anymore." Caleb looked at her. "That is the real challenge. That is what separates the survivors from the ones who just keep fighting forever." "Is that what you are, a survivor?" "I am trying to be." He squeezed her hand. "We both are." Marshal Wright approached them, his expression respectful. "Miss Mercer, Mr. Stone, I wanted to thank you personally for what you have done. This has been one of the most extensive corruption networks we have ever uncovered. Because of your bravery, a lot of innocent people will get justice." "My father deserves the credit," Hannah said. "He gathered the evidence. He paid the price for it." "Then we will make sure his name is honored. I will see to it personally." Wright turned to Caleb. "And you, sir, I understand you served in the war, Union Army if I am not mistaken." "That is right." "Then you know what it means to fight for something larger than yourself. The country owes you a debt, Mr. Stone. Today you have added to it." Caleb did not know what to say to that. He had never thought of himself as a hero, just a man trying to do what was right in a world that made it very hard to do so. But before he could respond, a familiar voice called out from the crowd, "Caleb!" He turned and saw Henry Tate pushing through the gathered townspeople, his old face creased with relief. "Damn it, boy. I thought you were dead for sure." "So did I for a while." Henry looked at Hannah, then back at Caleb. Something shifted in his expression, and for just a moment he looked almost proud. "You did good," he said. "Both of you. You did what needed doing, and you did not back down." He clapped Caleb on the shoulder. "Martha would be proud." The name struck Caleb like a physical blow. He closed his eyes for a moment, letting the pain wash over him. "I do not know about that," he said. "I do. I knew Martha. She believed in you even when you stopped believing in yourself, and she would have wanted you to find your way back to the world." Henry glanced at Hannah. "Maybe you finally have." He walked away, leaving Caleb standing in the snow with Hannah's hand in his and a future stretching out before him that he had never expected to see. The sun rose higher, burning through the clouds and painting the mountains in shades of gold. The storm was over. The town was waking up to a new day, and Caleb Stone felt something he had forgotten existed, the desire to stay. The days that followed were busy ones. The federal marshal set up a temporary office in Millbrook, taking statements from witnesses and gathering additional evidence. More arrests were made as the full scope of Crane and Blackwood's network became clear. Corrupt officials, complicit businessmen, men who had looked the other way while innocent people suffered. All of them were swept up in the investigation. Hannah spent most of her time with the marshal's team providing testimony and helping to identify documents from her father's collection. She was exhausted, physically and emotionally drained by everything she had been through. But she was also determined. Every time someone suggested she rest, she refused. She would see this through to the end. She owed her father that much. Caleb stayed by her side as much as he could. His own wounds were healing slowly, the bruises fading from purple to yellow, the cuts closing over with new pink skin. He still ached when he moved, still felt the after effects of 3 days of Crane's questioning. But he was alive. They both were. And that was more than he had dared hope for. On the 4th day after the cavalry arrived, Sheriff Hollister came to see them. He had been cleared of any involvement in Crane's crimes, though he had resigned from his position regardless. "I did not earn this badge," he said. "Not the way I wore it. Time for someone else to try." "What will you do now?" Hannah asked. "Start over, I suppose. Maybe head west. I hear there is land out in California for anyone willing to work it." He paused. "What about you two? Any plans?" Caleb and Hannah looked at each other. They had not talked about the future, not directly. There had been too much to do, too many immediate concerns to address. But now, with the crisis finally passing, the question hung in the air between them. "I do not know," Hannah said honestly. "Everything I had is gone. My father, my home, my old life. I need to figure out who I am now." "You could start right here," Hollister said. "The church needs a new leader. Your father was beloved in this town. People would welcome you." Hannah shook her head. "I am not my father. I do not have his faith, not the way he had it. Besides, this town holds too many painful memories. I need to go somewhere new, somewhere I can build a life without looking over my shoulder. And you, Stone back to your mountain." Caleb was silent for a long moment. He thought about the cabin, about the years of solitude, about the peace he had found there. But he also thought about something else, about the rocking chair that had sat empty for 12 years, about the photograph he had turned to face the wall, about the life he had stopped living the night Martha died. "I do not think so," he said finally. "That mountain was where I went to hide. I do not need to hide any more." "Then what will you do?" Caleb looked at Hannah. She was watching him with those green eyes that had seen too much and still menaged to hope. "I think," he said slowly, "I will go wherever she goes." Hannah's eyes widened. "What? You said you need to start over, build a new life. I need the same thing." He took her hand, holding it gently, like something precious. "I am not asking for anything. I am not expecting anything. I do not want to be alone anymore. And I think maybe you do not want to be alone either. We barely know each other. We have been through more together in 1 week than most people experience in a lifetime. I think that counts for something." Hannah was quiet for a long time. Hollister, sensing that he was witnessing something private, excused himself and stepped outside. Finally, Hannah spoke. "When I was in that room above the church waiting for Crane to come for me, I thought I was going to die. I thought no one would come. No one would help. No one would even notice when I was gone." She paused, her voice thick with emotion. "And then you found me. You did not know me, did not owe me anything, but you picked me up and carried me to safety. You fought for me. You nearly died for me. I did what anyone would do. No, you did what a good man would do, and there are not many of those left in the world. She stepped closer, close enough that he could see the flecks of gold in her green eyes. I am not ready for anything romantic. Not yet. There is too much I need to work through, too many wounds that have not healed. I understand. But I do not want to be alone either. And if you are willing to be patient, if you are willing to let me figure things out at my own pace. She took a deep breath. Then yes, I would like you to come with me. Caleb felt something loosen in his chest, some tight knot that had been there so long he had forgotten it existed. I can be patient, he said. I have had a lot of practice. For the first time in a week, Hannah smiled. A real smile, warm and genuine and full of something that looked like hope. Then I guess we have a plan. A week later they stood at the edge of town, their horses loaded with supplies for a long journey. The federal marshal had left the day before, taking Crane and Blackwood and a dozen others to face trial in Washington. The town was slowly returning to normal, though the scars of what had happened would take a long time to heal. Sheriff Hollister was there to see them off along with Henry Tate and a handful of townspeople who had gathered to wish them well. Years later they would learn that Henry had passed peacefully in his cabin the following winter, but not before telling everyone who would listen about the mountain men who had finally found his way home. "Where will you go?" Henry asked. "West," Caleb said. "There is a valley in Oregon that I have heard about. Good land, good water, far from anyone who might remember us. That is a long way. We are not in a hurry." Henry nodded, his old eyes bright with something that might have been tears. "You take care of her, Caleb Stone. She is a good woman." "She is, and I will." Hannah stepped forward and hugged the old men, surprising both of them. "Thank you," she said, "for everything." Henry patted her back awkwardly. "Just do not forget about us, girl. Right when you get settled, let us know how you are doing." "I will, I promise." They mounted their horses and turned toward the west, toward the mountains that rose against the horizon like a promise of things to come. The morning sun was warm on their faces, and the road ahead stretched out before them, empty and full of possibility. Hannah looked back once at the town where she had been born and raised, where her father had lived and died, where she had almost lost everything. Then she turned forward again and did not look back. Beside her, Caleb rode in silence, but it was a comfortable silence, the silence of two people who did not need words to understand each other. They had a long way to go, a new life to build, a future to discover. And for the first time in a very long time, they were both looking forward to seeing what came next. The road stretched ahead of them, winding through valleys and over mountain passes, carrying them further and further from the pain of the past. They did not know what they would find at the end of it, but they knew they would face it together. And somehow, that was enough. 3 weeks on the road changed everything and nothing at all. The mountains gave way to plains, and the plains gave way to more mountains. And through it all, Caleb and Hannah rode side by side, two people learning how to exist in a world that no longer wanted to kill them. They stopped in small towns to resupply, slept under the stars when the weather was clear, and found shelter in barns or abandoned homesteads when the rain came down. They talked, not about everything, not all at once, but in the small pieces that trust allows. Hannah told Caleb about her childhood, about the father who had taught her to read and think and question. Caleb told Hannah about the war, about the friends he had lost, about the men he had been before Antietam turned him into something else. They did not talk about the future, not yet. The present was enough. But sometimes in the quiet moments between sleeping and waking, Caleb would catch Hannah watching him with an expression he could not quite read. And sometimes when the nightmares came and he woke gasping for air, she would be there, her hand on his arm, her voice steady in the darkness. "You are safe," she would say. "I am here. You are safe." And somehow hearing her say it made it true. On the 23rd day they crossed into Oregon territory. The land here was different from anything Caleb had seen before. Green and lush, fed by rivers that ran cold and clear from the mountains to the sea. The air smelled of pine and salt and something else, something that felt like possibility. "This is it. Hannah said, looking out over a valley that stretched before them like a promise. "This is where we start over." The valley was called Willow Creek, and it lived up to its name. Willows lined the banks of the stream that ran through its center, their branches trailing in the water like green curtains. The soil was dark and rich, the kind of soil that made farmers weep with joy. And best of all, it was empty. No towns, no neighbors, no one to ask questions about where they had come from or what they were running from. They found a spot near the creek, sheltered by a stand of old growth pines, and Caleb began to build. He had not built anything since the cabin on Blue Ridge Mountain, but the skills came back quickly. Felling trees, squaring logs, notching corners. His body remembered what his mind had tried to forget. The satisfaction of honest work. The peace that came from creating something with your own hands. Hannah worked beside him, learning as she went. She was not strong enough to swing an axe or lift the heavy logs, but she could mix mortar and chink gaps and 100 other tasks that needed doing. And when the work was done for the day, she would sit on a stump and watch the sunset while Caleb cooked whatever game he had caught that morning. "You know," she said one evening, "I never thought I would be happy again. After my father died, after everything with Crane, I thought that part of me was gone forever. And now I am not sure what I feel. It is not happiness exactly. It is more like possibility. Like the worst is behind me and something better might be ahead." Caleb nodded. He understood exactly what she meant. "That is how healing works," he said. "It does not happen all at once. It happens in pieces so small you barely notice them. And then one day you wake up and realize you are not the same person you were when it started." "Is that what happened to you? After Martha?" The name still hurt, but not as much as it once had. "I thought I was healing, but I was not. I was hiding. There is a difference." "What is the difference?" "Hiding is staying still and hoping the pain goes away. Healing is moving forward even when it hurts." He looked at her. "You taught me that." "I did not teach you anything. You showed me by example. That is teaching of the best kind." He set down the pot he had been stirring and crossed to where she sat. "You taught me that it is possible to survive the worst thing that can happen to you and still find a reason to keep going. You taught me that courage is not the absence of fear, but the decision that something else is more important." "My father used to say that." "Then your father was a wise man." They sat together as the last light faded from the sky, not touching, but close enough that the warmth between them was its own kind of comfort. The stars came out one by one, scattered across the darkness like diamonds on black velvet. "Caleb." "Yes. Thank you for everything, for finding me, for saving me, for coming with me to this place." She paused. "I know I said I was not ready for anything more than friendship. And I meant it. But I want you to know that when I am ready, if I am ever ready, I hope it will be with you." Caleb did not answer right away. He was afraid that if he spoke, his voice would betray the emotion that was building in his chest. Finally he said, "I will be here, however long it takes." And that was enough. For now, it was enough. The cabin was finished 6 weeks after they arrived in Willow Creek. It was small but solid, with a stone fireplace, a loft for sleeping, and a porch that looked out over the valley. Caleb had built a rocking chair to go on that porch, the first piece of furniture he had made since Martha died. Hannah had watched him build it without comment. But when it was finished, she had sat in it for a long time, rocking slowly, looking out at the mountains. "It is beautiful," she said finally. "The whole place, the cabin, the valley, everything. It is home. Is it?" She looked at him. "Do you really feel that way, after everything you left behind?" Caleb thought about the question. He thought about the cabin on Blue Ridge Mountain, about the 12 years he had spent there alone. He thought about Martha and the life they had planned, the life that had ended at the bottom of a staircase. And he thought about Hannah, about the way she smiled when she did not know he was watching, about the strength she had shown when anyone else would have broken. about the way she made him feel like maybe, just maybe, he was not as damaged as he had always believed. "Home is not a place," he said finally. "It is a feeling, a sense that you belong somewhere with someone. I have not felt that in a long time, but I am starting to feel it now." Hannah stood up from the rocking chair. She crossed to where Caleb stood and looked up at him, her gaze bright in the afternoon light. "I think I am too," she said. And then she did something she had never done before. She rose up on her toes and pressed her lips to his. The kiss was soft, tentative, the kiss of someone testing waters they were not sure they were ready to swim in, but there was something else in it too. Promise. Hope. The beginning of something that had been growing between them since the moment he found her on that mountain road. When she pulled back, her cheeks were flushed and her eyes were shining. "I have been wanting to do that for weeks," she said. "I have been wanting you to do it for longer than that." She laughed, and the sound was like music, like water running over stones, like everything good and pure in a world that had too little of either. "We should probably take this slow," she said. "There is a lot we still do not know about each other. We have time. Do we?" She looked out at the valley, at the mountains rising in the distance. "Sometimes I feel like we are racing against something, like there is a clock ticking somewhere and we cannot see it. There is always a clock, for everyone. The question is whether you spend your time worrying about it or living despite it. My father used to say something similar. Your father sounds like he was a very wise man." "He was." She took Caleb's hand. "He would have liked you. He would have seen what I see." "And what is that?" "A good man, a damaged man. Yes, a man who has made mistakes and carries scars, but a good man underneath all of it, the kind of men worth building a life with." Caleb did not know what to say, so he said the only thing he could. "I love you, Hannah Mercer." The words came out before he could stop them, and for a moment he was terrified that he had said too much too soon. But then he saw her face, and the fear melted away. "I love you too, Caleb Stone." They stood there on the porch of the cabin they had built together, holding hands and looking out at the future they were just beginning to imagine. The sun was setting behind the mountains, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson and deep, endless blue. And for the first time in 12 years, Caleb Stone felt like he was exactly where he was supposed to be. Winter came to Willow Creek with a fury that reminded Caleb of the Blue Ridge Mountains. Snow piled up against the cabin walls, and the creek froze solid, and the world outside became a white wonderland that would have been beautiful if it were not so dangerous. They had prepared well. The cabin was stocked with food, the woodpile was high, and they had each other for warmth and company. The long winter nights were spent reading by firelight, talking about everything and nothing, learning the shape of each other's thoughts. And slowly, carefully, they learned the shape of each other's hearts. Hannah told Caleb about her mother, who had died when she was young, and about the loneliness of being raised by a man who loved her, but did not always know how to show it. Caleb told Hannah about his own childhood, about parents who had worked themselves into early graves, about the brother who had died at Gettysburg, and the sister who had married a man in California and vanished from his life. They talked about Martha. "She was beautiful," Caleb said, staring into the fire. "Not just in the way she looked, but in the way she saw the world. She believed in people, believed that everyone had good in them even when they did not deserve that belief. She sounds wonderful. She was. And I destroyed her." He closed his eyes. "I came back from the war different. Broken. The things I had seen, the things I had done, they were inside me like poison. And no matter how hard I tried to be the man she had married, I could not find him anymore." The nightmares. The nightmares were just the beginning. The drinking. The rages. The times I would wake up not knowing where I was or what I had done. He paused. "She stayed. Through all of it she stayed. Because she loved me. Because she believed I could get better. And the night she died..." Caleb was silent for a long time. The fire crackled and popped, sending sparks up the chimney. "I was drunk. I had been drunk for 3 days straight. And I had a nightmare, one of the bad ones, where the enemy is everywhere and you cannot tell friend from foe." He swallowed hard. "I woke up and I saw someone standing over me. In my mind it was a Confederate soldier come to finish what they had started at Antietam. I lashed out. I pushed. And she fell. She fell." His voice broke. "Down the stairs. And by the time I understood what I had done, it was too late. She was gone." Hannah moved closer to him, taking his hand in both of hers. "That was not murder," she said softly. "That was a tragedy. There is a difference. I killed her. No, the war killed her. The war broke something inside you and she got caught in the wreckage." She squeezed his hand. "You are not a monster, Caleb. You are a victim, just like she was." "I do not feel like a victim. Victims rarely do." She lifted his hand to her lips and kissed his knuckles. "But you have punished yourself for 12 years. Do you not think that is enough? Do you not think Martha would want you to forgive yourself and move on?" Caleb thought about that, thought about Martha, about what she would say if she could see him now. She had always believed in redemption, always believed that people could change, could grow, could become better than they were. "She would tell me to stop wallowing," he said finally. "She would say that guilt is just another way of hiding from life." "Then maybe it is time you listen to her." They sat together by the fire, not speaking, just being. And somewhere in the silence, Caleb felt something shift inside him. Not forgiveness, not yet, but the beginning of acceptance. The first small step on a road he had been afraid to walk for 12 years. Spring came slowly to Willow Creek, creeping in around the edges of winter like a shy guest at a party. The snow melted, the creek thawed, and the world turned green again. Caleb and Hannah emerged from their cabin like bears waking from hibernation, blinking in the sudden brightness. They had survived their first winter together. They had talked and fought and made up and talked some more. They had learned each other's weaknesses and strengths, fears and hopes. And through it all their love had grown, deepened, become something that neither of them had expected, but both of them needed. On the first warm day of spring, Caleb saddled the horses and led Hannah to a spot he had discovered the previous autumn. A clearing on a hill overlooking the valley with a view that stretched for miles in every direction. Wildflowers were beginning to bloom, splashing the grass with color. "It is beautiful," Hannah said. "Why did you bring me here?" Caleb dismounted and helped her down from her horse. Then he took both her hands in his and looked into her eyes. "I brought you here because I have something to ask you. Something I have been thinking about all winter." Hannah's breath caught. "Caleb, I know we said we would take things slow, and I meant it. But the truth is, I have never been more sure of anything in my life. You make me want to be a better man. You make me believe that I can be a better man, and I do not want to spend another day wondering what the future holds." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a ring. It was simple, just a band of gold he had traded for at a general store 200 miles back. But the way Hannah looked at it, you would have thought it was the most precious thing in the world. "Hannah Mercer," he said, "will you marry me?" Tears streamed down her face, but she was smiling, smiling so wide it looked like her face might break. "Yes," she said. "Yes, yes, 1,000 times, yes." He slipped the ring onto her finger, and it fit perfectly, like it had been made for her hand. Then he pulled her close and kissed her, and this kiss was different from all the others. This kiss was a promise, a commitment, a vow to face whatever came next together. When they finally pulled apart, Hannah was laughing and crying at the same time. "I never thought I would be happy again," she said. "After everything that happened, I thought that part of my life was over. It is not over. It is just beginning." They stood on that hill looking out at the valley that would be their home, and they talked about the future, about the house they would build when the cabin became too small, about the children they might have someday, about the life they would create together brick by brick and day by day. And for the first time in a very long time, Caleb Stone believed that the future was something to look forward to, not something to fear. They were married in June in a small ceremony by the creek. There was no church, No minister, no guests, except the horses and the birds and the wind in the willows. They spoke their vows to each other, simple promises that meant more than any formal ceremony could have. "I take you as my husband," Hannah said, her voice steady and clear. "I promise to stand beside you in good times and bad, in sickness and health, in joy and sorrow. I promise to love you, support you, and believe in you even when you do not believe in yourself. I promise to build a life with you, a home with you, a future with you, from this day forward until death do us part." Caleb took a deep breath. He had never been good with words, had always preferred action to speech. But some things needed to be said. "I take you as my wife," he said. "I promise to protect you, cherish you, and honor you. I promise to be patient when you need patience, strong when you need strength, and gentle when you need gentleness. I promise to face whatever comes with you, not behind you or in front of you. I promise to love you truly and completely for as long as I live." They exchanged rings, simple bands of gold that caught the sunlight and sparkled like promises made visible. And then they kissed, and the world seemed to hold its breath, recognizing the moment for what it was. A beginning. The first year of their marriage passed in a blur of hard work and simple pleasures. They expanded the cabin, adding a second room and a proper kitchen. They planted a garden and raised chickens and traded with the few neighbors who had begun to settle in the valley. They made love and made plans and made peace with the past. It was not always easy. The nightmares still came for Caleb, though less frequently now. Hannah sometimes woke in the middle of the night crying for her father. They fought about small things that were really about big things, and they made up in ways that left them both breathless and grateful. But through it all, they had each other, and that made everything else bearable. On the first anniversary of their wedding, Caleb came home from hunting to find Hannah sitting on the porch with a strange expression on her face. Not fear, not sadness, but something else, something he could not quite identify. "What is it?" he asked, setting down his rifle. "What is wrong?" "Nothing is wrong." She stood and crossed to him, taking both his hands. "I have something to tell you." "What?" She guided his hands to her belly and held them there. "We are going to have a baby." The words hit him like a physical blow. For a moment he could not breathe, could not think, could not do anything but stand there with his hands on his wife's stomach and his heart pounding in his chest. "A baby," he repeated, as if saying the word would make it real. "In the spring, around April, I think." A baby. He looked at her, and his eyes were bright with tears he was not ashamed to let fall. "Hannah, I never thought. I never dared hope." "I know." She cupped his face in her hands. "Neither did I. But here we are." He pulled her close and held her, just held her, feeling her heartbeat against his chest, and imagining another heartbeat growing inside her. A new life, a new beginning, a future he had never allowed himself to want. "I am going to be a father," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "Yes. I do not know how to be a father. Neither do I. But we will learn together, like we have learned everything else." He kissed her, then a kiss that tasted of salt tears and impossible joy. "I love you, Hannah Stone. I love you too, Caleb Stone, and I cannot wait to meet the person we are going to create together." The pregnancy progressed smoothly through the autumn and winter months. Hannah grew round and radiant, and Caleb fussed over her like a mother hen, driving her half crazy with his concern. "I am pregnant, not dying," she told him more than once. "Women have been having babies since the beginning of time. I think I can manage to walk to the outhouse without supervision." But he could not help it. After everything they had been through, the idea of losing her now was more than he could bear. So he hovered and worried, and made sure she ate enough and rested enough, and never ever lifted anything heavier than a coffee cup. Hannah tolerated it with more patience than he probably deserved. She understood where his fear came from. She understood that for Caleb, loving someone meant being terrified of losing them. It was the price he paid for having lost so much already. As her belly grew, they talked about names. If it was a boy, they would call him James, after Hannah's father. If it was a girl, they would call her Martha, "Are you sure?" Hannah asked when Caleb suggested it. "I know how much that name still hurts you." "It does, but it is also a name that meant everything to me once, and I want our daughter, if we have a daughter, to carry something of that meaning forward." He paused. "Besides, I think Martha would have liked you. I think she would be happy to know that her name would live on in a child born of so much love." Hannah kissed him softly. "Then Martha it is." Spring came to Willow Creek, and with it came the baby. It happened on a rainy night in April, just as they had predicted. Hannah's water broke just after dinner, and Caleb, despite all his preparations, immediately forgot everything he had learned about childbirth and started running around like a chicken with its head cut off. "Caleb!" Hannah shouted from the bed. "Caleb, stop! You need to help me, not panic." He stopped, took a deep breath, and became for the next 12 hours the calm and steady presence that his wife needed him to be. It was not easy. The labor was long and painful, and there were moments when Caleb was sure something was wrong, sure he was going to lose both of them. But Hannah was strong, stronger than anyone he had ever known, and when the sun rose on a new day, so did a new voice. Their daughter came into the world screaming red-faced and furious at being expelled from her comfortable home. She had a full head of dark hair and eyes that, once they opened, turned out to be the exact same shade of green as her mother's. "She is beautiful," Hannah said, cradling the tiny bundle against her chest. "She is the most beautiful thing I have ever seen." Caleb looked at his wife and his daughter, and he felt something inside him break open. Not break apart, but break open like a seed splitting to let the new growth through. All the walls he had built, all the armor he had worn, all the distance he had put between himself and the world, it all fell away in that moment. He was a father. He had a family. He had something to live for, something to protect, something to cherish. And he was never, ever going to let it go. "Welcome to the world." "Martha Stone," he said gently, touching his daughter's tiny hand. "Your grandmother would be so proud." The years that followed were the happiest of Caleb's life. They added on to the cabin again and again as their family grew. Martha was followed by James 2 years later, and then by Sarah, and finally by little Thomas, who came into the world just as his father was beginning to wonder if 4 children might be enough. The valley filled up around them. Other families settled nearby, building farms and businesses, turning Willow Creek from a wide spot in the road into a proper town. Caleb served on the town council for a few years, though he never ran for anything more. He had no interest in power, only in making sure his neighbors were treated fairly. Hannah became the heart of the community. She taught school for a while, then opened a small lending library, then became the unofficial peacemaker for every dispute that arose between families. People trusted her, respected her, came to her with their problems and their joys. And through it all, they loved each other. Not the desperate, consuming love of their early days, but something deeper and more durable. The love of 2 people who had walked through fire together and come out the other side. Caleb's nightmares faded over the years, though they never completely disappeared. Some wounds are too deep to ever fully heal, but he learned to live with them, to accept them as part of who he was, rather than trying to outrun them. And when the bad nights came, Hannah was always there, just as she had been on that first night in his cabin on Blue Ridge Mountain, just as she would be for the rest of their lives. 20 years after they first arrived in Willow Creek, Caleb and Hannah sat on the porch of the house they had built, watching the sun set behind the mountains. Their children were grown now, scattered across the country, pursuing their own dreams. Martha had become a teacher in San Francisco. James was a lawyer in Portland. Sarah had married a farmer in the next valley over, and Thomas was still finding his way traveling the world and writing letters home full of adventures they could barely imagine. The house was quiet in a way it had not been for decades. But it was not a lonely quiet. It was the quiet of 2 people who had said everything they needed to say and were content to simply be together. "Do you remember the first time I kissed you?" Hannah asked, breaking the silence. "On the porch of the first cabin. You had just told me you loved me. I was terrified. So was I. But it was worth it." She reached over and took his hand. All of it was worth it. Every struggle, every sacrifice, every moment of doubt. It brought us here. Caleb lifted her hand to his lips and kissed her knuckles, the same gesture she had made to him so many years ago. "I would do it all again," he said. "Every minute of it. If it meant ending up here with you, I would walk through fire 1,000 times. You already did. We both did." They sat in silence as the stars came out. The same stars they had watched on that first night together. The same stars that had witnessed their wedding and the birth of their children and all the ordinary, extraordinary days in between. "Caleb, yes. Thank you for finding me on that mountain road, for not walking away when you could have, for giving me a life I never dreamed was possible. You gave me the same thing. You gave me a reason to stop hiding, a reason to rejoin the world, a reason to believe that maybe I was not as broken as I thought. You were never broken. You were just lost. We were both lost. And then we found each other." Caleb smiled, and it was a smile full of peace and gratitude and a love that had only deepened with time. "I suppose we did." The night grew cool, and eventually they went inside, leaving the porch and the stars and the memories behind. But the memories followed them, as memories do. And that night Caleb dreamed not of war and death and the faces of the men he had killed, but of his wife and his children, and the life he had built from the ashes of the life he had lost. He woke with tears on his face, but they were tears of joy. Caleb Stone died on a spring morning 35 years after he first found Hannah on that mountain road in Virginia. He was 85 years old, and he went peacefully in his sleep with his wife of 35 years holding his hand. Hannah lived another 3 years, long enough to see her great-grandchildren born, long enough to tell them the story of how she and their great-grandfather had found each other. She told it as a love story, which it was. But she also told it as a story about courage, about second chances, about the power of choosing to move forward even when the past is pulling you back. When she finally joined Caleb, her children buried her beside him in a plot they had chosen together years before. The headstone read simply, "Caleb and Hannah Stone together in life, together in eternity. Love never ends." And every year on the anniversary of the day Caleb had found Hannah on that mountain road, their descendants would gather at the grave and tell the story again. The story of the mountain men and the virgin bride. The story of two broken people who had healed each other. The story of love that had been tested by fire and had emerged stronger for it. It became a legend in Willow Creek, passed down from generation to generation. And like all legends, it grew in the telling. But the heart of it remained true, that sometimes the bravest thing you can do is not run away from your past, but turn and face it. That sometimes the people who seem most damaged are the ones with the most love to give. And that sometimes, if you are very lucky, you find someone who sees not what you are, but what you could be, and loves you anyway. The story of Caleb and Hannah Stone reminds us that it is never too late to start over. That the worst tragedies can lead to the greatest joys. That love, real love, is not about perfection, but about persistence. About showing up day after day and choosing each other even when it is hard, especially when it is hard. Because that is what love is, not a feeling but a choice, not a destination, but a journey. Not something you find, but something you build brick by brick and day by day until you look around and realize you have created something beautiful, something worth fighting for, something worth living for. And so we come to the end of our story. The end of Caleb and Hannah's journey, though. The journey of their descendants continues to this day. We leave them where all good stories leave their heroes at peace, at rest together, in a love that death itself could not defeat. But before we go, let me ask you something. When was the last time you took a chance on someone? Not because it was safe, not because it was easy, but because something in your heart told you it was right. When was the last time you let someone see the parts of yourself you are most ashamed of, the wounds you carry, the mistakes you have made, the fears that keep you awake at night? When was the last time you believed that it was not too late, that no matter how old you are, no matter how much you have lost, there is still time to find love, find purpose, find meaning. Caleb Stone was 49 years old when he found Hannah on that mountain road. He had spent 12 years hiding from the world, convinced that he was too broken to ever be part of it again. But one act of courage, one decision to reach out instead of pull back, changed everything. It can change everything for you too. I truly believe that. No matter where you are in your life, no matter what you have been through, it is not too late to write a new chapter, to find your own Hannah, to become the hero of your own story. All you have to do is choose. If this story meant something to you, I would be grateful if you would take a moment to like this video. It helps more than you might think, and it lets me know that these stories are reaching people who need to hear them. If you know someone who is struggling, someone who feels alone or lost or broken beyond repair, share this story with them. Sometimes a story is all it takes to remind someone that they are not as alone as they feel. And if you want to hear more stories like this one, subscribe to the channel. I have many more tales to tell, stories of courage and love and redemption, stories of ordinary people doing extraordinary things. Finally, I would love to hear from you. Where are you watching from right now? What time is it where you are? Leave a comment and let me know. I read every single one, and it means the world to me to know that these stories are finding their way to people all over the globe. Because stories matter. They connect us across time and space, across cultures and languages, across all the things that divide us. They remind us that we are not alone in our struggles, not alone in our hopes, not alone in our desire to love and be loved in return. The story of Caleb and Hannah Stone is over, but your story is still being written. Make it a good one. Until next time, remember, it is never too late to change your life, never too late to find love, never too late to become the person you were always meant to be. All you have to do is take the first step. And sometimes that first step is as simple as not looking away when someone needs you, as simple as saying yes when fear tells you to say no, as simple as believing against all evidence to the contrary that the best is yet to come. Because it is. I promise you it is. The best is yet to come.